Hello and thanks for watching this Life Solved short. I'm Robin Montague, and in these videos I'm getting a taste of world-changing research taking place at the University of Portsmouth, as featured in this season's Life Solved podcast. Since Valentine's Day is just around the corner, we thought we'd chat about all things romance today, or more specifically, sex. Oh, and robots. Can't forget the robots bit. Intrigued, here to share a little more is Dr. Trudy Barber, whose current research interests are in the multi-mediated body. That includes digital explorations of gender, sexuality and sexual behaviour with tech. I'm very excited to talk about all of this. So, Trudy, thank you very much for joining me today.
That's all right. Nice to be here.
So can you give us a bit of background about how you came to look at this?
Well, we need to go back in time about 30 odd years when I was a mature student studying fine art at Central St Martin's College of Art in London. And I was doing a lot of artwork, a traditional figurative painter, drawer, and I was looking at how we view images of the body and how we make images of the body. And I was looking at how we actually engage with, say, the life model that we draw. So, traditionally you have a naked person sitting in front of you and you do observational studies from them. And that's a very intimate process. And I found it really interesting reading up and finding out about all the artists in the past and their muses and their life models and the reputation of life models and the engagement of relationships between the artist and the model. And I found this all very interesting. And yes, I'm not going to talk about my relationships with the life models. That's a whole other podcast. So I was looking at the intimacy of the body and how we interpret it and how we develop our images of it. And this involved me doing things like, just before I went to Central St Martin's, I spent about 3 months at the Southampton University at their morphology laboratories and drawing cadavers, dead bodies. I was going down the traditional route, like Leonardo did, drawing, the muscles and everything. And I also managed to get a artist in residency at Fawley Power Station. This is a long time ago now. And the only way I could identify drawing the machinery at the power station was in my mind's eye to turn it into parts of the human body. So you've got all the wiring, the electrical wiring of the power station became the veins. And I could associate what I was seeing at the power station with what I was then drawing of the dead bodies, the cadavers. So I turned the cadavers into machines and the power station into the human body. So I was making these sort of crossovers. And so, of course, when I managed to get into the big posh art school in London, I wanted to carry this sort of forward and started looking at, ways that we could interpret the body, and particularly the body as machine. And I found there's this whole philosophical context of, like Descartes with the body is the machine, the mind is the soul, and do we inhabit a bodily machine and all this kind of stuff. And I thought this was all fabulous. And so I managed to find a virtual reality company in London called Virtual S. They no longer exist, sadly. And because we're talking about very early days of VR. And I took my ideas to them and I said, knocked on the door, and I said, excuse me, could we do some work together? I want to do virtual sex. And I had a whole sort of portfolio to show them. And they said, yeah, all right then, we'll give you a go. So the rest is history. And I had a whole team of people making this VR world for me, because what we decided to do was, it was at the time when AIDS was like really sort of being promoted as something really scary, and it was like a terrible time. And so what we did was I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting to kind of gamify sex in a virtual environment? So we created this space that you go into, and the sounds was me breathing. So you're excited already, I can tell. And so you'd go into this space, and you'd see this the words "safe sex" spinning around. It was all completely three-dimensional, and with your headset on, which is like, I always tell everybody, it's like putting on a small cathedral on your head because it weighed a ton, and it was attached to a massive computer, and it was all like £500,000 worth of kit. Whereas now we've got it in our pockets pretty much. So anyway, so we produced this world where you had the word safe sex, and you had a body of the Venus de Milo that was already sort of like a pre-packaged construct. That was, I mean, you had all the different software people like Autodesk 3D, Studio Max, and all that. They were making these pre-polygonized objects that were in the virtual world. So we had a Venus de Milo, but we had to make a male figure. And this was where it got fun, because I don't think anybody had really made and constructed a virtual penis before. So we wanted, you had these polygons, you see. There was nothing like the sophistication we've got now. And so we had these polygons, and we made this sort of thing that looked a bit like Gort from The Day the Earth Stood Still, the film. And it just kind of stood there with this sort of small trident, well, it's quite large trident missile sticking out from between its legs. So that was sort of like, okay, this is the future of sex. It's looking really clunky. And we had flying condoms and flying dildos that would talk to you. So the idea was, with the game, is to get into the space, be terrified by the huge Gort and the Venus de Milo, and you could choose whether to stick the floating condom onto the trident missile penis or the dildo into the body of the Venus de Milo.
I have got so many questions. I'm literally tallying up my questions as we're talking.
And then when you actually got the condom anywhere near or sort of around the trident missile penis, you got the orgasmatron effect, and you were flung into this sort of corridor of flashing colours that were and this kind of sound that would woo, and then different noises are going, oh, you know, all that kind of stuff. And then once you got through that, you were out on the other side and you were out of the game.
What a journey. I think that's the only way you can explain it. I mean, there is so much I want to ask about all of that. I think, should we go back and just dissect a few bits? Firstly, you mentioned there how you kind of you started to think about the relationship between the human anatomy and machines. That in itself, I think, is quite, at the time, you mentioned it was around sort of the 80s or the late 70s?
It was the late 80s when I started doing this. But I mean, I was at art school from the 1970s and the 70s, because I'm that old. And I just can always like to draw the body.
And what was the ambition for creating this sort of cyber sex space? What was the overarching aim? Was it something to maybe take people out of their, I suppose, out of their headspace and into something else? Because at the time, those conversations weren't necessarily happening day to day.
So what we did was, because nobody's got VR at home then, I mean, of course, it was 300 quid and you've got your Oculus Quest 2 at home. I mean, I've got one in my living room. So that's amazing. I can now do it in my living room. Not cyber sex, but just play a game. So it was just to try and get the public to see what it's like for real, because people were imagining all this kind of hype and nonsense about virtual reality, and it was going to eat our brains and we were all going to become zombies, but actually the mobile phone did that. But that's another story. And I found, again, in the London sort of cultural scene, I found a whole sort of pre-LGBTQ subculture of the fetish scene. The fetishists, they were having, it was a time when they were having a lot of amazing clubs going on in London that you could go to. They would have the Skin 2 rubber ball once a year, and they said, we'll show your VR installation there. And so what I did with this installation was we used it to raise money for AIDS charities.
And I suppose at that time you mentioned there, obviously it was during the AIDS pandemic and everything that was going on. There was a lot of fear and a lot of scaremongering, not just from the media, but just generally there was scaremongering.
Yep.
So something like this, I suppose the purpose as well was just to try and show people that this fetish scene or this environment or culture isn't scary. It's actually fun.
Yeah, and you know, it was just something a bit different, because I think I've got there's a paper I wrote quite a while ago, and it's called Deviation as a Key to Innovation, Understanding a Culture of the Future. And I think that if you've got some people with with really different ideas that deviate things from the norm, then you've got different types of innovation coming out from that. And I think maybe that's something that I did with virtual reality, was I deviated from what people thought it was going to be used for.
Cybersex, then, for anyone who isn't aware, and I mean, everyone's kind of got an image of what cybersex is in their head, I imagine. I definitely have one. But how would you describe cybersex?
Well, basically, cybersex is engaging in some kind of sexual behaviour using things like digital spaces, things like going online. I think even using remote controlled objects, that kind of thing. But mostly it's about engaging in that intimacy through a digital space.
That's something that doesn't necessarily need to be solo. It's an inclusive thing. So I suppose now, with the advancement of technology and the internet and the collaboration between AI and the internet, it's not necessarily just something you do alone anymore.
Yeah, it's changed the way people have relationships completely. I mean, you've got things like polycules now. So you used to have polyamorous relationships, but now you have polycules, which are a whole load of groups of people who are together online that form a sort of singular poly relationship between them all. So there's various types of intimacies that have been developed through cybersex, through digital spaces, through the access to digital spaces. So, and I think sometimes they meet about once a year or something, the polycules do. But I think it's up to each group, but they can have anything sort of 5, 6, 10 people.
And these platforms that you mentioned, or these spaces where they're meeting, what are they? Are they websites? Are they apps?
Well, however they want to connect with each other. So I think for some people it's like a website or a private Facebook page, or no, that's for old people now, Facebook. Get Real or whatever it is people are doing now. So I mean, I can't keep up with it all, to be honest.
I can't either, to be fair. I definitely can't. And do you think people can have the same sort of quality of a relationship through cyber or through digital ways as you could do person to person? Do you think it's a viable relationship?
Yeah, I think for some people it can be their only relationship. Depends what sort of social context they've got, or what kind of identity issues they may have, and things like that. And of course, going into digital spaces where you can take on avatars and be whoever you want to be, that opens up things even more. I mean, before, just putting on a rubber frock in the car in London in the rain in November, trying to get to a fetish club in the 80s and 90s. Now you can just stick your headset on and be this glamorous sort of other person, complete in whatever kit you want. I think the internet and the new all the different technologies changes the way we perceive intimacy and the way we put value onto intimacy. So having maybe that point where you just hold someone's hand in real life takes on an even greater importance than I don't know, whatever it is you do in cyberspace and digital space.
And I suppose on some level, everyone's, to an extent, when you hear cyber sex, you think of the extremes. Everyone always goes to the extremes, but it can also be the sort of the lower end scale of things, like you mentioned, just creating a version of yourself digitally. We do that with, social media apps all the time. We adjust how we look in them to make ourselves more appealing, or just because, not just to ourselves, but other people, the opposite sex. We use dating apps. We send nudes. This is all digital spaces that we're communicating and having these relationships. So technically, a lot of us, if not the majority of us, are all engaging in cybersex.
You are, yeah, you absolutely are, and it's quite interesting to see this kind of dawning on my students when I do a lecture on cybersex, and they're often left at the end of the lecture, sort of going like that.
Just to point out, she's I'm in shock. Yeah, I'm not surprised. What kind of things do you cover in that lecture?
Well, just the sort of things that we've been discussing. Also, the context of gender issues, LGBT issues, identity contexts, the actual dangers of what goes on, and the sort of deception and things like that can happen with relationships.
Thank you so much, Trudy. This has been an absolute pleasure. It has blown my mind. And it's so interesting to think how human behaviour and culture works in tandem with innovation and development, especially when it comes to cybersex. If you'd like to hear the full interview with Trudy, listen to the Life Solved podcast on the University of Portsmouth website, or just search Life Solved on your favourite podcast app. You can also click the link in the comments box below or head to port.ac.uk/research. See you again next time.